The African Cup of Nations, also known as AFCON for short, officially begins tomorrow, which is of course the 21st day of December 2025, with Morocco, which is of course the host country, playing against Comoros. Of course, we're going to see how that game turns out. Of course, we all know that AFCON is Africa's major tournament, and that's because it sort of brings together, different players who are plying their trade across Europe, across Asia, across different parts of the world, to compete for the ultimate prize, which is of course the AFCON trophy. But then the big question is, what clubs in the Premier League are going to be the biggest losers? Of course, we all know, like I said, you have many African players who are plying their trade across different, clubs in Europe, in England particularly, and then of course in Turkey, in Italy, and different parts of the world. All right, so the question is, which club, particularly in the Premier League, because of course that's what we talk about here, is going to be the biggest loser, in terms of the numbers of players who are already gone, and then in terms of the impact that they of course have made in their clubs. And then are there clubs that are not affected as a result of AFCON, regardless of what anybody thinks? I know we've had times when, I think it was Jamie Carragher that was arguing or was of the opinion that AFCON is not a major tournament. I know how hard people came on him. You had the likes of Mikel Obi, sort of criticizing him at the time and saying, come on, you can't talk down on AFCON. It's a major tournament in the African continent. All right, but that's by the way. So which clubs in the Premier League are going to be the biggest losers? That's what I'm going to be talking about today. And of course, I will leave you with the usual question as to which clubs, that's talking about those that are not really affected, as a result of the tournament, are going to make the best use of, this 2-3 weeks that the tournament is going to last, to sort of get more points and then, possibly do well in the Premier League. All right, so I'm going to be starting. There are quite a number of clubs that are going to be affected, or that are already, affected as a result of the tournament. And there's this analysis that was done by the Premier League, and then they talked about clubs like Sunderland are going to be the biggest in terms of impact, because they are losing about 6 players to the tournament, and these 6 players include, so I'm going to be reading out their names. So you have Noah Sadiki, you have Ato Masuaki, you have Mandava, you have Bertrand Traore, you have Talbi, and then you have Habib Diarra. So these are 6 players that are going to be out from Sunderland. I mean, it's going to really impact their performance, because these players have been really impactful. Of course, we recall that Sunderland was one of the biggest spenders, in terms of signings in the last transfer window. Of course, it actually showed how prepared they were, to be coming back into the Premier League. But with this tournament, it's really going to affect them, because, like I said, you have about 6 players who are already departed, for AFCON from the club. And then we have Burnley. Burnley is going to be without 3 players, and that's talking about Axel Tuanzebe, you have Foster, and then you have Hannibal. So Fulham are of course going to be without 3 players as well. That's talking about 3 of Super Eagles very important players. That's talking about Alex Iwobi, Samuel Chukwueze, who has been on top of his game since joining the club from, I think, AC Milan. And then you have Calvin Bassey, who of course I talked about in one of my videos, where I talked about the fact that, he's less talked about, even though he's been very impactful on the club, in that central defensive role. Yeah, so Fulham are going to be without 3 players, and these 3 players, from what we've seen, have really contributed to the growth of the club. They've contributed to where the club are today. So Manchester United, of course, they're going to be without 3 players as well, and that's talking about Brian Mbeumo, who is, I think, currently the highest scoring player in Premier League. And then you have Ahmad, who of course plays for Ivory Coast. Brian Mbeumo, by the way, plays for Cameroon, where he's the captain. And then you have Mazraoui, of course. So Brentford are going to be without 2 players, and that's talking about Ouattara and then Frank Onyeka, who is of course another Super Eagles player. So moving forward, Everton are going to be without 2 players. That's talking about Liman Ndiaye, and then Idrissa Gueye. Ndiaye actually plays for Senegal, of course, and then of course Man City are going to be without 2 players as well. That's talking about Omar Mamouche and then Ryan Ait-Nouri. So Nottingham Forest are going to be without 2 players. That's talking about Willy Boli and then Ibrahim Sangari. Tottenham are going to be without 2 players. That's talking about Bissouma and then Papa Matassa. Papa Matassa, of course, plays for Senegal, and then Bissouma plays for Mali. So West Ham are also going to be without 2 players. They're talking about Aaron Wan-Bissaka and then El Hadji Malik Diop. Moving forward, Wolverhampton Wanderers are going to be without 2 players as well, and that's talking about Tawanda Chirewa and Emmanuel Agbadao. Liverpool are going to be without just a player. Of course, that's the Egyptian king. That's talking about Mohamed Salah. And of course, there have been a lot of conversations around Mohamed Salah's future, if he's going to return to the club, at the end of AFCON, or if he's going to be joining another club. There have been a lot of talks around his future in the club, the fact that he's missed a couple of matches, and then how that is really telling on his relationship and the extent of impact he's having on the club. So moving forward, other clubs. Okay, so you have clubs like Crystal Palace. Of course, from this analysis, Crystal Palace is a bit lucky because so you have Chrysanthus, who of course is a Nigerian player. He wasn't called up, so he's going to remain at the club. You have Chad Riyad, who plays for Morocco. He wasn't called up. He's going to remain at the club as well. And then you also have Sheikh Dokore, Mali. He wasn't called up, so he's going to remain at the club as well. So Brighton as well will be without Carlos Baleba. Carlos Baleba has been on the lead for Manchester United for quite some time now. So he was called up by Cameroon to join the squad. So they are going to definitely miss him there. And then we're going to be talking about some clubs that are not going to really be impacted as a result of AFCON. And top on the list, of course, is Arsenal. Arsenal are not going to be impacted because they do not have any of the players who is going for AFCON. And I think it sort of boosts their chances of winning the Premier League because, of course, you have all your players who sort of understand themselves and how they play together, all back in the club. Yeah, so Arsenal are not going to be really impacted. And then Bournemouth would have been impacted if Ghana had qualified because, of course, you have Antoine Semenyo, who plays for the club and, of course, plays for Ghana, his country side. But, of course, he's not going anywhere because Ghana didn't qualify. Because Ghana are not there, of course. So, moving forward, you also have Cherries. Amin Adli, who did not also make the Morocco squad. Of course, he also plays for AFC Bournemouth and he's a major player in the club. And then you have other clubs including Chelsea, Leeds and Newcastle United. All right, so these clubs all, I think, Arsenal, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Leeds and then Newcastle, all 5 of these clubs are unaffected as a result of the tournament. But then the question is, how many of them are going to really make good use of this opportunity to, grab as much points as possible? I'm particularly rooting for Arsenal, of course. Like I said, it provides another opportunity for them to strengthen their place in the top of the Premier League. But of course, it depends on how they are able to sort of utilize this opportunity. All right, so the question for today, as usual, is do we see Arsenal strengthening their place in the top of the Premier League, especially because the AFCON is not affecting them in any way? They do not have any of the players who are going away for AFCON. So just share your thoughts on the comment section as usual. And please remember to share, like, and thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.